Yeah. Oh, shalom, my friends. Shalom, my enemies. This is your old pal, Rabbi Sol Solomon, founder. And so, wait, I think I have to hold on. I've got to do this because I just lowered my volume. One moment. Got to stop that. Got to bring this back up. I repeat. Oh, shalom, my friends. Shalom, my enemies. This is your old pal, Rabbi Sol Solomon, founder and spiritual leader of Temple Sons of Bitches in Great Neck, New York. And I am delighted and excited to be talking to a man who loves cabaret, who loves nightclubs. I want to see if I need that. Hold on. He is someone for decades now, as I find my notes, who, where the hell is my notes? Hold on, God damn it. All right, 1 second. Here we are. Anyway, let me, because I want to give this man a proper introduction. This guy knows so much. Oh, shalom. Hold on. This man, by 1987, he had already seen so many cabaret shows that he won a special Bistro Award for being such a dedicated dedicated audience member for cabaret. And soon thereafter, he took this as sort of a sign, a signal. And for WLIM Radio in New York, he has written a chapter for the guidebook, The Cabaret Artist's Handbook, and he's even got some material that is going into a new upcoming book called So You Want to Sing Cabaret. He is an associate producer of the Bistro Awards and chairman of the advisory board for MAC, which is Manhattan Association for Cabarets and Clubs. And most importantly, really, he once gave a really, really great review to ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the neighborhood, Roy SANDER. Shalom, Roy.
Hello.
Hello.
After all that bluster, hello.
Hello, how you doing? How are you doing? How are you feeling all right?
I'm feeling terrific.
Thank God. I mean, do you know anybody who's got the COVID stuff? Are you worried? There's a family, friends?
I do know people who have had it.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
Okay.
I don't take it. I don't think this is trivial at all. No, I take it seriously, but I am feeling terrific.
All of I mean, you and Dave were both. I assume you knew William Wolf. We lost him about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, you didn't know William Wolf?
I know who he is. No, I know who he was. Yes, no, indeed. But I didn't know that he had died.
Okay. But you're in a New York, let me ask you, you're in a New York apartment building, am I right at the moment? That's where you dwell?
Yes, yeah, that's my...
So what are they doing in...
That's my official residence, right.
Oh, I didn't hear that got broken up. What did you just say?
It's my official residence. It's...
Right, so in this apartment building with dozens of other tenants, are there special, like, are there notes on the elevator, or you do not take the elevator, you got going out? What do they have in this building that people are having to follow?
Okay, there are notes in the elevator, and we get emails from the the resident manager about any new rules or policies. And we just got one yesterday that, according to the New York State edict, apparently, not only do people have to wear masks when they're outside in a and they can't maintain a 6-foot gap between other people, they also, according to this note, if we go out into the hallway or into the elevator or to the laundry room or to the lobby, we must also wear a mask or some kind of covering. I ordered masks from Amazon weeks ago, and they're late in coming, so I'll have to wrap myself in a boa or something.
Well, do what I do. All I do is I put strings on my yarmulke, and look there, it works perfectly. Look at that.
Yeah, pity I'm an atheist and I don't have a yarmulke. Otherwise, that's the first good excuse for religion I've ever heard.
There we go. It keeps her alive sometimes. Well, let me ask you, since we're going there, we'll talk about cabaret. Believe me, we'll talk about cabaret. But I want to ask Roy SANDER, because this as a rabbinical type person hurts my heart a little bit. You don't even admit to being born Jewish. That phrase irks you.
I think it's not that that phrase irks me. I think it's meaningless to say one is born and then list a belief system.
Meaningless, you say. You're frozen.
It's invalid because what you have to unwrap that. What does it mean to be born Jewish or Catholic or whatever? It means to have been born in an environment in which the people largely follow those traditions, if it's just tribalism, or those beliefs, if you're talking about the philosophy. And yes, I was born into a Jewish environment, but aside from the fact that, yes, that means I probably tasted lox before someone born in the Midwest did. Other than that, it's just I was exposed to various things that other people might not have been, just as they may have been exposed to certain foods or traditions that I have not been. Those are all harmless. And you decide, do I like it? I mean, I was exposed to pickled herring. I think it's disgusting. I mean, so one isn't defined by them. You'll get over it. One isn't defined or determined by those things. One is always free to say, do I agree with this? Do I not? And in the case of a belief system, it's essential to think and not accept anything uncritically. Foods and tastes and customs are basically philosophically neutral. They're matters of taste, matters of comfort, and that's an individual decision, of course, as is what one's belief system should be, an individual decision. It can't be decided by one's parents or background or ancestors. One chooses. And I certainly don't accept the notion of a mysterious supernatural being. I think that's nonsense. And the idea of, oops, I hear.
How do we live?
Pardon?
I'm saying, if you don't believe in some kind of great giant
turtle in the sky, yes.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
I said turtle in the sky. It's a King and I, is quasi King and I reference, but go ahead. I'm getting it back to musical.
Okay.
The King and I reference, that was what that was.
I don't remember that.
But continue your question.
I have some. This is what I have in common with your brand. That's not it. Yeah. The question is, if you don't believe in some kind of and flowers and hemorrhoid ointment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, you broke up. All I heard was hemorrhoid ointment, and you got my attention. But
I know. How do you explain all the things that surround us in the world?
The fact that, well, things exist. That is as fundamental as you can be. Certain things are obvious and axiomatic that don't need explaining. They exist. What needs explaining is why certain things behave the way they do, what properties they have, how, when given those properties, how does that affect other things? That's all matters for scientific inquiry. But the fact that things exist doesn't need a previous cause. That's silly. If any previous cause is something that exists, so you can say how maybe one existent gave rise to another, but the very fact of existence is a given, and you should move on and now do serious inquiry into understanding the various things that exist.
But you understand through what came before. I mean, in other words, if you're trying to cure a disease that runs, let's say, in one group of people, you kind of have to trace back. You can't start with one person and not acknowledge that something created and get into that gene pool.
Well, no, of course, you have to look at the relevant facts, and the relevant facts might be the pattern of infection, say. I mean, there are all sorts of things that are relevant, and they depend on the particular issue being investigated. But while my conviction is solid, I don't find this all that interesting because it's so obvious that in the 21st century, we're still talking about God. It's an embarrassment. People are, I mean, I hasten to add, people should be totally free to believe what they think is right. Absolutely. I would never challenge that in the slightest. I just think a lot of people have it wrong.
So would you consider yourself a secular humanist?
I consider the word humanist is a little sloppy. That needs unpacking also. What do you mean by humanist?
Okay.
Do I like people? Humanity? Yeah.
See, I hate.
Well, I can name names also that I hate, but in general, and there are probably millions that I would say, ooh, yeah. But it's their right to live. I don't challenge unless they're trying to kill me,
yeah, right.
Or some other innocent person. But in general, I like humans and what they're capable of. I think is wonderful. I think it's great. And I have great admiration, I may start crying now actually, for people who do create and give joy and comfort and delight to other people. That's all very nice. And that they have the ability to do that. I mean, people like Steve Jobs and great scientists and inventors. I think that's great. So that's the human potential, and I love it. And switching back to or moving back to cabaret and also the performing arts, I have great respect and admiration and affection for for people with talent, who are able to do this, who are able to create.
Well, you're talking to me.
But I am talking to you, yes. No, I have great and respect. And that's one reason I love cabaret so much, because I see some extraordinarily creative work on the cabaret stage. Not just good singing, and that good singing I love also. I mean, but really putting their talent to creative use. That's great. And yes.
Well, in cabaret, what would be the difference between, good singing, where somebody comes up and sings 14 songs and they're great voice and really do it well, versus putting cabaret, quote unquote, to great creative use? How's that different?
There are two issues here. One is just what is meant by singing well.
Yeah.
That's one side of it. I've often maintained that having a good voice is about 5% of what singing is about. And it's lovely when someone has a good voice. And it's a pleasure to listen to. But it can be very boring if that's all you bring to the table. I remember seeing a cabaret show by a quite well-known, I guess she's internationally well-known artist who has a glorious voice. It was a show about the songs of World War II. I was bored silly from beginning to end. And the songs of World War II are the most emotionally charged and rich, among the most emotionally rich, moving songs ever in the whole canon. And yet she brought nothing to it, none of the context or subtext. It was just, she sang it exquisitely. And when I got home that evening, I put on a Vera Lynn recording, and she sang, and Vera, particularly the song, "There'll be bluebirds over the white cliffs of Dover." There'll be bluebirds over the white cliffs of Dover.
Yeah.
And 10 seconds at most into Vera Lynn's performance of it on the Vera Lynn recording, I was crying. She could bring so much emotion just in the sound of her voice and the way she colored the sounds and her phrasing in very subtle ways. And that's the difference between technically singing well and singing the song and communicating something more than just the words and lyrics, the words and music.
No, I get it.
Use the words and music to communicate something. And in cabaret singing, you're communicating not just the meaning of the song, but what makes it especially interesting is your interpretation of the meaning. And I'll give you an example, another example. Julie Wilson, who was the greatest cabaret artist I've ever seen, I may start crying again, the greatest cabaret artist I've ever seen, was able.
I'll give you a handkerchief. Hold on. Here you go.
Technology hasn't reached that level of sophistication where I can take it. She could take a song that I've heard or had hundreds of times before, and suddenly she uncovers layers in it of meaning without an introduction. She doesn't have to introduce the song and say, in this, I'm going to explore the such and such or the underlying whatever. No, I remember there are two songs in particular that are standards. One might even call them chestnuts or war horses. It's Only a Paper Moon, and I've Got the World on a String. At each of those songs, I remember hearing her do it in live performance and just sitting there with the tears rolling down my face, because just by the power and innate intelligence, I say innate, and I'll tell you why I say it in a minute, intelligence that she brings to it and sensitivity, she found layers of underlying meaning that she was able to express without telling you what they were, but they were there, they were palpable. And that's the difference between a great cabaret singer, as I say, and a great opera singer. But the greatest of opera singers could do it, like Beverly Sills could have me crying. And that is why years ago, I used to subscribe to the New York City Opera and not the Met, because the New York City Opera did a Traviata that had me crying. And the Met could be quite wonderful, but yep, that was really, 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 really good, or even really, really great, but I'm not moved. So.
Okay. No, that's a marvelous explanation. And I do apologize to viewers who are sometimes Roy is freezing or I'm freezing, and you hear a little bit of an answer, and then it kind of gets herky-jerky like the Max Headroom thing. But we're definitely getting the gist here, and we're laughing and crying with Roy Sander. Do you remember the first cabaret show that you ever saw as a young little?
Yes, you're frozen.
Did you get that? The first,
but I'm quite toasty. We'll talk. No, yes, my parents took me. It was not a typical cabaret show. I was 10 years old. There was a place on 8th Street in the Village called the Village Barn.
Wow.
And it was not far from the Bonsoir, and it would have been nice if the first one had been at the Bonsoir. I had to wait until I was on my own to do that. And the Village Barn specialized in, or maybe that's all they did, country music reviews. And that's what it was, the Village Barn. And I had a grand time. I don't remember the details of the show, but I remember loving it. And so it started.
Well, you were 10 years old. Yeah.
And I haven't stopped going since.
Wow. And there was a point, I mean, for all those years, you were just, as it were, an audience member. You weren't professional. You weren't.
That's right. I still think of myself as first and foremost an audience member. Now, but I know that I'm not quite the typical audience, because also when I was 10 years old, my parents took me to see South Pacific. And I remember thinking that the book, and I didn't use these words, but I remember thinking that the structure of Act 2 was problematic as compared with.
You knew, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't put my finger on it, although I did have an idea that it was because it became episodic, whereas the first act, we get to know the characters, and we get into the character situation, and it has more emotional content. Act two had more plot to get through. And so the scenes changed rapidly from, he's on the island fighting this war on one of the Pacific Islands. And so it moved about. And then I thought, I wasn't as happy with that. And it wasn't until the Lincoln Center revival of 10, 15 years ago, whatever it was, that I saw the problem solved. The director directed it beautifully so that it flowed, act two flowed. But anyhow, the point is I was 10 years old and I was just an audience member, but I was already critical. I mean, I was beginning to hone my critical faculties, although I obviously hadn't just really started then, because it wasn't as if that was the starting point. It was the point at which I was first aware of it. That's the way I thought. I naturally thought.
So let me ask you, Roy, in all those years before with the Bistro Special Award and all of that, what were you doing, thank you ever so much, in terms of a job? Because you didn't go into the arts. You're like a financial person, or what's your thing?
Oh, no. In the early days of computers, I was a programmer.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, no, I was a techno nerd. I also designed computer systems. I may have designed the first or the second, we're not sure, online system in the insurance industry. And I managed its development.
Good. No. Wow. So that allowed you to go into like a couple of times a week and lay down $20, $40, $60 to go and see and have a 2-drink minimum and enjoy.
Yes, and also theater. I mean, I went to theater a lot. But the other point is, at one point, when I was no longer at the insurance company, I was there for a long time. I moved back to New York. At that point, I was living in Philadelphia and working in Philadelphia. And I'm coming to New York on weekends, of course. Because when you're in Philadelphia, you have to leave it. I was working for a software and consulting company as a director of consulting. And they thought it was fascinating that I was writing reviews at night and doing a day job, either managing a project. So they interviewed me, and I pointed out that I don't see the disparity. Both jobs require the same skill set. What I focus on may be different, but it's the same skill set. I said, when I criticize, I don't mean negatively, I mean, when I analyze and criticize a show, I have to have an analytic ability to be able to figure out what works, what doesn't work. It's not enough to say this is good, this stinks. I have to explain why. I have to first understand myself why, and then explain. And the second point is communication. I have to be able to express it clearly so that the reader can understand what I'm saying. And if I'm reviewing and the other point is that, and whereas in my day job, if I'm writing a report analyzing different communication systems, I have to first be able to analyze them, what's good about each and what's bad, and then I have to write a report and explain it clearly. So it's the same set of skills. And in fact, I think being a critic is, I find, much more difficult because I'm writing about someone's work, someone who may have worked very hard and did not set out to do a bad job or a mediocre job, but may have. So I have to still get the point across without being cruel or nasty and still be constructive.
And that's, may I add, that's especially difficult for having to do that with cabaret, because if you go review a Broadway show, even if you're singling out actors who are doing great work, not so great work that time, it's one thing. But cabaret is like, I'm here, you're up there with a pianist, and now I'm reviewing you and what you personally are getting across. It's very hard for them not to take that personally, right?
Well,
And also, let me add, the thing is, you're so known in the cabaret world. It's such a chummy, clubby little world in New York that you know this point. And then they redoing backstage or in bistro or cabaret scenes perhaps, and then you've got to go see them a week later. You see them at some other cabaret show and they're like, hi, how are you?
I know it's a bit tricky, and people have said, well, and the question has come up also, sometimes singers become reviewers, and isn't that a conflict of interest and all? And I think, no, it's not. It depends on the reviewer's honesty, integrity. I remember once I told a press agent I cannot review the show. This person, there's absolutely nothing about it I thought the person was off base. And when I ran into this person later, she came over to me and I really admired her. They said, I understand you really didn't like what I did. And we talked about it. And I like that. It's, I'll say, one review I wrote about someone, the person, he told me about this later. He felt, oh God, he felt really bad. And a friend of his said to him, read that review again. It's not a kick in the teeth, it's a kick in the ass. And I thought that's really one of the nicest things ever said about me. She got, my point was to help him get better, to say what I thought he needed to hear to improve. And at one point, in 1999, I bought an apartment in Berlin, as you know. So it was my second home. And I gave up reviewing for a period. And in my farewell column, thinking I'd never go back to it, but anyhow, in my farewell column, I explained that I never considered the critic-performer relationship to be adversarial. I said, in my writing, my objective has always been to help each performer be the best he or she could possibly be. And I added, is that any different from the performer's own objective? That's an honest performer. Some who are looking for an ego trip or whatever, that's another matter. The people who take their artistry seriously, that's their objective.
Yeah.
Regarding
let me
themselves. Yeah.
Right. But let me ask you, Roy. So did you ever come across a cabaret artist that you reviewed terribly, you hated what they were doing, and then they made changes and improved and maybe took your advice, and then you saw them 2 years later, 5 years later, and they became wonderful?
Absolutely. And that's one of the most gratifying.
All right. Yeah.
That's one of those gratifying parts of what I do, is to be able to watch someone over a period of time. There was one person I remember, she wanted me to see her show, and I saw her show, and we spoke on the phone. She wanted to know what I thought. And I said to her, you're not really a jazz singer, are you? She was entering jazz, and her background had been legit theater. And we were talking. And just a few years later, she won a Bistro Award as a jazz singer. She had grown, she had gotten into it, and she's one of my favorites now. Yeah, I've seen it.
Name?
No, I am not going to. No. By not mentioning names, I'm free to really say what I want. In a review, if I'm really writing a formal review, I'm taking the time to choose my words very carefully. Now I stand behind everything I'm saying now live, but it's different. Extemporaneous speech is very different from the rigors of written positions.
That's
But it's happened to a lot of people. One singer who had an operatic background started doing some cabaret work, and she bored the hell out of me. And she got better and got more into the meaning of the song, not just the technique of producing notes. And now she's one of my favorites also. So I've seen it many, many, many times.
Oh, wonderful. Well, this is wonderful. Let me also ask Roy Sander, by the way. You mentioned you didn't think you'd be writing about cabaret ever again because you were living in Berlin. You came back. How often do you still write reviews? I mean, pre-COVID. And where can people read your stuff?
Well, I am review editor of BistroAwards.com. BistroAwards.com. I stopped writing reviews there because I assign reviews to other people to write, and I edit them. I do write almost all of the bistro picks, which are recommendations for people to see. And some of those are rather like mini reviews. I'm also reprinting and revising, posting on the site, columns that I wrote, commentaries with advice, and just comments about mistakes I see people making and practices I think ought to stop.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there and ask you, what are some of the most common mistakes that especially novice cabaret, or even more seasoned cabaret people do? And that you're saying, time out, stop, rethink.
But okay, there are just a couple of, let's say three things come to mind. One is a blight of the whole music industry, and that is melisma. Melisma, you know what it is. Okay. Melisma is
Explain it.
I am going to explain it because it's not a word that's commonly known. Melisma is the technique of using multiple notes for one syllable, where they're singing a syllable or a word, and they just play with the music. It's really bullshit. What it does is it shows off their vocal prowess at the expense of communicating the meaning of a song. And you hear it, it started maybe on Star Search. I'm not sure where it started. It started sometimes, part of it is with what passes for soul singing, but doesn't have soul. It just has bullshit technique. And you see it, I saw it on Must Have Bought, not America's Got Talent, the big ones, not Star Search, the one in between, the big
something, yeah,
whatever it is, any of these things, all of these, you hear the audience cheering in the middle of a song because the person held a note long, or the person just hit a falsetto, or the person played with a note. And in the middle of the song, they're not listening to what the person is saying, what the person is communicating. So there's that. So whenever I hear that, unless it serves the meaning, and it can, if you listen to what Jennifer Holliday did, I was on opening night of Dreamgirls. It was thrilling. When she finished, I'm telling you, I'm not going. We all stood up and cheered automatically, even though that first act had maybe another 45 seconds to go. There was nowhere to go after that. It was thrilling. And there, because it served, it was done with emotion and passion. It served the song. Same thing as scat singing. Yeah, I think most of this is just profoundly silly, except some people can be very expressive. Gigi Bridgewater, brilliantly expressive when she uses scat. It's saying
Shelby
something.
Taylor, right. So okay, but that's one. Melisma is a bad.
Right.
What's another bad?
Now, right. So most people who go into cabaret are past that. Most. Depends, I guess, where the cabaret is located. What city, how sophisticated. The other is in thinking that because cabaret is such a personal medium, that therefore it's appropriate or even required that they tell us about themselves. As I've written, I have a life, I don't need yours. And the piece that I posted on BistroAwards.com is called It's Not About You. It talks about this at much greater length than I'm about to do now. But the point is, they think that what's fascinating to them is fascinating to the audience. So many of them will, in their cabaret show, will talk about what a song means to them. I don't give a damn what the song means to you. Make me glad that you sang it. Make it mean something to me. Express in your interpretation what the song means. Or they'll talk about how growing up, they used to sing in front of a mirror, sing to Barbra Streisand album with the hairbrush. Do you know how many people have said that? Yes, everyone of both sexes has sung into, I haven't because I don't have a voice, has sung into a hairbrush. It's not interesting.
I've sung into a mezuzah. It sort of works the same way.
It requires more precise focus. It's tough to get that sound in just the right place in the thingy.
Right. But let me ask you something. Wouldn't that serve the song? If someone is going to sing a Barbra Streisand known song, is it not sort of nice for the audience to know that when they were 9 years old, they sang that song in front of a mirror and dreamed of being a cabaret singer, and now here they are singing it, and they.
Oh, that's so tired. Not unless it's saying something. I've set 3 criteria for autobiographical patter to be valid, because there are times when it is valid.
Okay, right.
One is if it says something that has greater resonance beyond your own experience. If it says something that makes a point about a more common human experience.
But you just said that the whole Barbra Streisand hairbrush thing is something like everybody's done. So isn't that universal?
No, it's not making a point. It's not an interesting point. It has to be something that's enlightening, or in somehow, it's just, especially if you've seen more than one cabaret show, you've probably seen more than one that's done one. It's not interesting. It doesn't reveal anything unique about you that makes you interesting. It's just, it's like saying I was born in Skokie, Illinois. Who cares? If there was something about the background in Skokie that can add some color.
Cabaret person that
your
career.
Sound.
Can it be? And then worked with.
I know you're breaking up. You'll have to start that question again. And again. I don't. You're frozen.
Let's say the person still frozen. Hold on.
The image is frozen.
Am I unfrozen? But the voice is okay?
Now it's okay.
Okay, mazel tov. So let's say the person who is doing the cabaret show is a Barbara Cook or a Karen Akers or someone like that. And their thing is, okay, and then I was in this show and I sang this. And it follows their career path personally.
But that can be fine, because don't forget, they have a career path. They have something interesting. Most people in the audience will be interested in show business. So backstage stories are always interesting. Someone like Barbara Cook, who had an illustrious career, we're automatically interested in knowing more about that. Yeah, so it's like one time, one of the members of the Village People, after he read one of my pieces about not autobiographical patter, he said, "Oh, I was planning to talk about some of his background and experiences." I said, "Yes, perfect." I said, "You're part of our cultural environment, the Village People." Yes.
Well, was he the Indian or the cop?
I ain't telling you.
I'm just
There were
because I
more than
auditioned.
those two.
I know. I auditioned to be the proctologist, and I didn't get hired. I was very upset.
Because you were a
I had
pain
the
in the
doctor's
ass.
coat and
That's
the
why.
Well, thank you.
Right.
Wrecked him. I nearly killed him. No, but
Right.
you,
No,
now
so-
what is the third? Did we get the
Wait. So the first
Okay.
is that it has a resonance beyond just your limited experience. Two, if it's beautifully expressed so that it's spoken literature. Since this is now praise, I'll use an example. Billy Rowe, who did a superb Tom Waits show.
Oh,
Yeah, and it was based on her experience in New York in, I think it was the 70s. And I think it may have been one particular year also, maybe her first year in New York, I don't remember. But she's such a good writer that it was a pleasure just to hear the words she spoke. Also, note, talking about New York in the 70s, while it's her personal experience, it's creating or recreating that culture, that period, that era. So that has much greater resonance than just her life. So she satisfies two of the criteria. And there are other people who just express it so well. The third is if it's funny. We all like to laugh. And so if your anecdote is funny and humor is appropriate for your subject, for your show in general and your persona, yeah. If it's funny,
yeah.
Cool. So those are the three criteria.
Those are the exceptions to no number two. Yeah. Now, but I want to get very quickly. You mentioned there were three different.
So right, melisma, that.
So
and the
have
other
one is telling the personal story to melisma, and the third is.
Well, the one thing I have to mention, something related to this, the one about personal story, and that is at the end of the problem with personal story is it's amateurish. If you think that you're just there to reveal yourself and talk about yourself, no, it's amateurish. It's similarly at the end, so people now have taken to thanking everyone, the wait staff, the booking manager, the person who did your flyers. That's amateurish also. Why do you think we should care about who you're grateful to? At the end of a curtain call, like at Bette Midler and Hello Dolly, did she thank her dresser? Thank after the show. Did she thank the
maybe
director?
she did the final performance. Maybe when the whole show.
I did say that. However, on special occasions, when there's a different dynamic going on, such as the final performance of a long run, or maybe it's just a one-time only event, and therefore it's a special event where people were more interested in who contributed to it. Yes, there are certain times when it is appropriate, and I do talk about that. Yes, on the final performance, anything goes. When I saw Rosalind Russell's final performance in Auntie Mame, at one point when she swirls her bag around, she threw it into the audience that night, and then she kicked someone on stage and said, "If only I had a good director." It was her director who had walked on stage, and so she kicked him. I said, "If only I had a good director." It's a private joke. It was a private joke. Things happen on final nights. No. It was a joke. She didn't knock him on the floor and stomp on him.
Yeah.
No, I mean, yeah.
That is wonderful.
Yeah. No, and so the third one is a pet peeve.
Yeah.
The third is a pet peeve, and that is encores. It's become so silly. Julie Wilson didn't do encores. Mabel Mercer, another great, didn't do encores. They had the good grace, but they finished the show. The show was well enough structured. The final song was the final song. Now shows are structured with a phony walk on and walk off and walk on, rather. That I really hate. I mean, don't leave the stage, for Christ's sake, because you have the embarrassing possibility that the audience is going to have stopped applauding.
Well, yeah, of course.
And it happened once because someone once said, a good singer, someone once said, if my final number, I'm going to do such and such. And she did it. And the audience applauded, and she walked off the stage. And the applause stopped because it was over. So they thought, because she had lied to the audience. And then she sheepishly poked her head back on stage and said, raise her finger, one more. Anyhow, it's just silly. So that's just, I remember in
Okay, that's right. Yeah.
And
No,
then
it also makes me think because we have an encore number in my show, Shalom Damn It, and even with Rabbi Sol Solomon. But amazingly enough, 2 or 3 people still clap. So I was able to walk back on stage and do the number without too much embarrassment. Also helps if you got the piano playing the whole time, so there's no.
Oh, I give clues to, but if you insist on doing it, may give signals and stuff, or let the tech director say, once again, ladies and gentlemen, so and so.
Oh, that can work.
There are all sorts of things that you can do, but don't lie to the audience.
We are talking with Rabbi Sol Solomon and Roy Sander, the cabaret and theater maven. So just a couple more minutes with you. Why? What you mentioned that you thought you had given up cabaret, right? Certainly writing, but maybe even seeing it when you moved to Germany. First of all, why the hell did you move to Germany? And B, did you go see cabaret stuff there, or it's a whole different life and you don't go out and do that?
No. First of all, I didn't move there. It was my second home. So I spent a lot of time there.
Oh.
And I still do.
Okay.
Well, except for this recent situation where my flights were canceled and traveling was restricted, et cetera, et cetera. I should be there right now. I go there 5 times a year, 3 weeks each time. Why did I do that? Why did I choose to make that a second home? If you've been to Berlin, you might understand why. I went there for the first time thinking, okay, I can tick it off my bucket list. And I said, oh my God, this is wonderful. I had no idea. And I went back a few months later, and I said, let me face facts. This is really where I want to be. Now, why? When friends ask, why do I love Berlin so much? The answer I gave was true, but the fundamental reason I didn't realize until a waitress in a restaurant there asked me. The answers I gave was, it has a lot of energy, it's beautiful, it has the energy of New York, but without the friction. In New York, when I do something as routine as going supermarket shopping, I'm always prepared to endure some indignity. And often I don't have that, often there's no confrontation, it all works, but still I'm always prepared. There's a certain tension. It's in the streets, it's everywhere. And I used to love New York, love it. But it's so badly run that it's just appalling. But aside from that, but then the fundamental reason occurred to me. I said to the waitress, I know this may sound silly because I'm sure you have a government bureaucracy at least as bad as ours, but I feel the American spirit more in Berlin than I do in America. And I said, by that I mean the notion that if you have a private dream, go for it. No one will stop you. And now we have government regulations up the wazoo that will stop you and make it difficult. It makes it more difficult to start a business, to live your dream, all sorts of things. And they may have it there, but there's a feeling in the air of do what you want. Yeah, obviously you can't take something away from someone else or harm someone else. But
Germans have never done that. But yeah.
You know that when Marlene Dietrich returned, who was very pro-American and entertained the Allied troops, when she returned to Germany after the war, they booed her in Munich and they cheered her in Berlin. So Berlin itself was not Hitler's power base. It was where the capital was, it was not the power base. The power base was the South. Now, aside from that, that was a different generation. and you do not blame a geographic area or the people who were born in the same geographic area as for crimes committed generations earlier. That's sloppy thinking. Now,
2 years ago, Roy, we're having we're freezing like crazy here. We may have to end this a little more, just slightly more quickly than I really wanted to, because you're just barely getting through at this point. But real quick, so you've told the lovely reason that Berlin makes you feel a little more free, in a manner of speaking, than you can here.
Yes, and I'm not the only one who picked up on it.
I think we're going to have to.
Really? Because you keep breaking up also, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's mutual. I hear myself just fine, which is rare because I never hear myself very well. And then, but you, sometimes I hear you like, and then you freeze completely, and it's an issue. So I think we're going to run out of the ability to even, but we can continue this another time on Dave's Gone By. I will certainly invite you back to the program. But before I let you go, I want to ask, aside, I mean, Julie Wilson, I guess, is your all-time favorite. But what was your all-time favorite cabaret show that you ever went to see?
There is no one favorite. I can just name a few. Okay.
Yeah.
The show, when I first saw it, was called Theater Songs by Maltby and Shire. It
became closer than ever, right?
The review is starting here, starting now.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Right. There's a show that Mark Nadler did. I'm a stranger here myself. I could say anything that Steve Ross does is
Steve Ross is, yeah.
There's a show that Michael Schubert and Maggie Megreed, his wife, did a couple of decades ago. I think it was called Through the Window. It was on the subject of voyeurism, a musical multimedia piece ahead of its time on the subject of voyeurism. It was brilliant. Anne Hampton Callaway and Liz Callaway doing sibling revelry stands out. Janice Hall's Marlene Dietrich show. These are things that are just coming to mind, and I'm leaving out other great shows. I mean, it's so those are some.
I thought that was going to be our last question, but now it does bring me to mind of like, when do you think that New York and the rest of the country can roll out where people will feel comfortable again?
How do I know?
Okay, I'm asking.
No, I mean, there are things I really know a lot about. This one, when you consider that it also includes government force and government whim, as well as the fact that we still haven't done enough testing, and we've been criminally deficient, criminally in quotes, I don't know that it's actually criminal, it's certainly derelict, in responding early to it and gearing up for testing ability, our testing capabilities. Who knows? I mean, we've been flying blind, and as a result, they just come out with the most draconian measures, which may or may not have been necessary and probably weren't if they had had better data. So who knows? There are a bunch of assholes running things and some really good people,
Well, let me ask you, Roy, have they made a decision? I just don't know off the top of my head. You're on both the boards of the MAC and the Bistro. Are those canceled? Are they postponed? Are they canceled for the year? Are they?
Well, right now, nothing's going to be happening this month, and I doubt that anything is going to be happening much in May. I heard that, or I read that theater will probably not really resume until September. That's what I heard, but I don't know. I'm not the source. And when you
no, but I'm saying of what has already opened in cabaret since last June, the awards. I'm talking about the Bistro and the MAC Awards. Are they fini? Are they just postponed?
Oh,
Why?
well, no. I mean, we had the Bistro Awards in on
Oh, yeah,
March
that's right.
9th.
Yeah,
That
sorry.
was the last significant event in the cabaret season. The Mac Awards, the voting was in, and because the Mac Awards presentation gala evening had to be canceled, there was an online reading of the, tearing up, opening the envelopes and announcing the winners. So they were announced. That was in late March, as I recall. And for this year, the calendar year 2020, there were shows that were done in the first few months. And if we pick up again in, let's say, September, maybe it'll be sooner, maybe it'll be the summertime, I have no idea, then the eligibility year would be probably still the calendar year. If it is still the calendar year, then we have the first few months and the last few months to consider. But I don't know, it might, for all I know, we would change the eligibility year just at this one time to take into account this extraordinary situation we're in. So I don't know.
Well, it is uncertain times, but what I am certain of is that it has been lovely chatting with Roy Sander. You're going to want to go to bistroawards.com for some of the little pieces that you write, and you also edit all the other cabaret reviews on that website. You're also on the board of MAC, and still...
No, I'm not. I'm on the chairman of the advisory board of MAC.
Oh, chairman of the advisory board of MAC, right. So that's still on the board, ain't it?
No, I'm still at the board meetings, but advisory, I voice my opinion, but I don't vote with the MAC.
Okay, didn't realize that. Well, anyway, Roy, first of all, I wish you most of all, stay healthy there in New York. And obey the rules of your apartment building, and of as draconian as they may be, if they keep you alive, it may be worth the cost benefit we were talking about earlier.
I haven't left my apartment in almost a month, so yeah.
Wow. Well, do you have groceries delivered? How the hell are you eating?
Yeah, Amazon and I are best buddies forever, or best friends forever. Yeah.
Well, God willing, you will step out of your apartment in a couple of weeks. I'll step out of my shul in a couple of weeks. That'd be nice, because I need some air as well. But it is lovely, lovely chatting with you and talking about art and theater and cabaret, and even, you should pardon the expression, religion. It's fun to have a questioning mind like yours to grapple with. So I wish you much health and success for many, many years to come. Roy Sander, thank you so much, and shalom to you.
So long, thanks.